Hello again, everybody, and welcome to this NSPN conversation. I'm Justin Barrientos, and today we are talking with Matt Pryor, who is starting his first year as the Activities and Athletics Director at Benilde-St. Margaret High School in St. Louis Park. Matt, thank you for joining us here today.
Glad to be here, Justin. I appreciate the opportunity.
All right, let's start with, I guess, the first question. Why did you pursue this opportunity at Benilde-St. Margaret?
I started my career off in education. I was a health and phy ed teacher. I'll still tell people to this day that was the greatest job I've ever had. Being a phy ed teacher at an elementary school, you're a rock star walking around those hallways. Loved that job. Was at St. Thomas Academy the last 2 years as an assistant athletic director. I was very transparent with them, that I did not plan on being an assistant athletic director the rest of my career, but knew I needed to learn, right? Wanted to go to an environment that has a reputation for being very buttoned up, which obviously St. Thomas Academy is. Worked for a fantastic boss there, had a lovely experience learning the operational aspect, the really the nuts and bolts of the role. And then when the opportunity here at Benilde St. Margaret's came up, this was a school in a community that checked all the boxes as to what I was looking for. Was blessed enough and fortunate enough to have landed the job, and I'm excited to be here.
All right, so you're taking over for Rick Johns, who retired last year, and you were hired in April of this year. So you had a little bit of a chance during the last school year to kind of see what was ahead of you. And I understand that you went around and you talked to some of the coaches and to some of the activities leaders. What was that like to kind of get your feet wet early on last season?
Incredibly beneficial. What's been really neat to see is how open and transparent and helpful other athletic directors have been, since I've stepped into this role. I'm still yet to have a single conversation with another athletic director where they haven't finished with, "Hey, you have any questions, you need anything, here's my number, don't hesitate to reach out." So just the overwhelming support from the athletics community has been incredibly encouraging, especially for someone like myself who's experiencing a lot of this stuff for the first time. To have experienced individuals that are just a phone call or a text away that I can reach out to and who have made themselves available, that's invaluable to someone like myself. And it's been cool to see how tight knit the AD community is.
All right. Reading some of the information about Benilde and about the job ahead of you, I understand that there are 70 plus activities that go on during the year at Benilde. When you hear something like that, even though this is a job that you want to do, how daunting of a task is that to kind of oversee that many activities?
No doubt, it's a lot, but it's also exciting, right? And that's where I do feel incredibly fortunate coming from a phy ed background. Whereas, in phy ed, I had some kids where phy ed was the highlight of their day. That was all they wanted to do. And if it were up to them, they'd be in phy ed 7, 8 periods a day. There are other kids on the opposite end of that spectrum where they dread phy ed, right? That they're not looking forward to it. And so, having that base as a teacher where I had to meet kids where they were at, that was incredibly formative in my educational experiences. I was obviously a kid growing up who would have stayed in phy ed 7, 8 periods a day. That's where the activity space is unique, where it offers up opportunities to those kids who aren't necessarily, the kids who are incredibly driven from an athletic standpoint. Not to say that there aren't crossovers, between activities and athletics, because there certainly are. But supporting activities, growing activities, that's a part of the holistic educational experience.
You were also a varsity girls basketball coach for a while at a couple of different schools, and you coached some D1 athletes. Tell me a little bit about your history in coaching and what that has meant to you.
I was a college baseball player. Uh, through one slider in our fall practices, felt a little pop in my elbow, and sure enough, that was the end of my athletics career. And had Tommy John surgery. That was really a soul searching time in my life where I was trying to figure out what the next steps were. I was fortunate enough going through that Tommy John recovery where I could still play basketball. I found myself playing pickup basketball at Concordia Academy one morning before school. I was invited by a friend. Just heard, there were good runs there, and was presented with the opportunity to be a JV girls basketball coach. I think I was 20 at the time. I was a little nervous about it. You know, I loved basketball, had always loved basketball. Basketball was always my first love, despite being a college baseball player. Um, Knew I was going into education. Coaching had always interested me, but you know, again, at 20 years old, I just didn't know, frankly, if I was ready to start coaching girls basketball. Um, Accepted the job, got in, and you know, 15 minutes into the first practice, I knew I was like, man, I love this. I love this. This is a calling. This is a it was something I was incredibly passionate about. Was able to parlay that into a varsity coaching opportunity there at Concordia Academy. Then had the opportunity to go back to my alma mater, coach at Minnehaha Academy. I actually got to coach my little sister there for 2 years there at Minnehaha, which you know I've seen plenty of you know parent and an athlete coaching dynamics. I'm still yet to see a sibling coaching an athlete dynamic, which let's just say that made for some testy family dinners, but it was a lovely, a wonderful experience. And, you know, coaching has been hands down the most formative experience for me from a professional development standpoint. To work with kids from a variety of different backgrounds, varying skill levels, varying goals, um, and frankly, just the opportunity to work with kids outside of that which is, you know, the school day, the impact you can have on kids as a coach, it's a blessing, and it's been a blessing in my life, and now I'm excited, you know, in the role of an athletics director, where obviously I've had to step away from coaching, but now to be able to support our coaches, give them the resources that they need in order to be able to pour into our kids, that's where I really find the enjoyment in this role.
All right, let's go back to coaching your sister a little bit. You said it's testy family dinners, but what is it like in practice and in games? Do you have to kind of rein back a little bit so you don't show any favoritism? What's that kind of friction like in practice and during games?
Yeah, you know, it's funny as you know, my sister definitely should have started for us. But I refused to start her. She was the sixth man. She was actually her senior year. She was all state honorable mention even as a sixth man. But you know, I was determined that despite sharing a last name that you know, no one would be left with the impression that she was being favorited just because she was my sister. So then that is when things get awkward when obviously your father has your cell phone number and calls you after a game like, dude, what are you doing? You should be starting your sister. So you know it was interesting having to navigate that, but I will say credit to my sister. The maturity with which she was able to approach that situation was incredible. And you know, you ask both of us, both my sister and I, you know, what our favorite memory was looking back at that. And you know, we were fortunate enough to win a state championship in 2019, and I still have the picture. I actually keep it here in my office, where me and my sister were hugging each other after winning that state championship, and that was an incredible experience. You know, we were always, because I was so much older than her, we were always in very different stages of life growing up, but to have that shared experience, that was amazing. I know that's something we're going to remember for the rest of our lives.
A faith-based school. That's what Benilde-St. Margaret is. That's what some of the schools that you have been at in the past have been. How important is that to you to be at a faith-based school?
Incredibly important. I'm really glad you asked that. You know, I've been involved in faith-based education ever since I started my professional career, and you know, not just as a believer myself, but to be able um, to educate, to teach, to meet kids where they are at and be able to come from that perspective and have no reservations about sharing that perspective, leaning into that. I I love that. You know, and then also the standard of accountability. It allows you to hold your kids, your coaches to the standard of accountability that you hold yourself to coming from a faith-based environment. To me, that's really special. And that's where, you know, when I say Benilde checked all the boxes as to what I was looking for, that was paramount. Faith-based education was something that was incredibly formative in my experience as a student, and to be able now to work in to continue to work in faith-based education. To me, that's something that's really important as we want to not only, prepare our kids so that by the time they're 18 years old, they're ready to go out into the real world and be successful, but to be able to come from the perspective of, hey, like I'm looking out for you in regards to eternity, that's incredibly special to me.
So as you approach your first year at Benilde-St. Margaret as the activities and athletics director, when you get to the end of this coming school year, what is going to be a successful year in your mind?
Through my experience at St. Thomas Academy, I saw what a really well-run athletics department looks like from an operations standpoint. You know, I got to tamp myself down. As a young guy, you come in and you're like, man, like I want to put my stamp on this. I want to do all these great things. You have these grand visions as to what you want Benilde-St. Margaret's to look like. But, as I really step back and look at this holistically, if by this time next year, I'm able to sit down with my department and say, hey, you know what? Our operations are on point. Whether it be, our game schedules are all scheduled out a year in advance. We got officials buttoned up and squared away. We know our process for transportation. If I'm able to look at my department and say, hey, our operations are buttoned up coming off of year one, I think we're going to rule that a success.
All right. Well, again, thank you for taking the time to talk to us and good luck in your first year at Benilde-St. Margaret.
Thank you very much, Justin. I appreciate it.
All right, Matt Pryor, who is the new Activities and Athletics Director at Benilde-St. Margaret High School. I'm Justin Barrientos, NSPN.TV.